My wife thought I was invisible. Just a man she could walk over while she laughed with her secret lover. But everything changed the night he called me. Sir, that one word flipped our entire marriage upside down and exposed a truth so brutal that karma didn't even wait. I always believed my life was simple, steady, and safe. Not perfect, no, but grounded. I'm Kalen Rivaro, and for most of my adult years, I thought I understood what love looked like. I thought it was the quiet mornings when Alira and I shared coffee without speaking, the gentle brush of her hand when she walked past me, the small routines that made a home feel like a haven. I lived inside those moments like they were proof that everything was fine. Maybe I was too comfortable. Maybe too trusting. Or maybe I just didn't see the cracks forming right under my feet. Alira was the kind of woman who walked into a room and shifted the energy without trying. Bold smile, confident voice, eyes that sparkled when she talked about her dreams. I admired that about her, maybe even envied it a little. I worked long hours at my job, quiet by nature, not the kind of man who made noise in the world. She was the storm. I was the calm. And somehow, for years, that balance made sense. But life has a strange way of whispering warnings before it screams them. Little things started shifting, her size becoming sharper, her attention drifting somewhere far away, the warmth between us fading like a light bulb losing power. I didn't ask questions. Maybe out of fear, maybe out of love, maybe out of a hope that everything would settle back to normal. I didn't know then that nothing about my life was normal anymore. The first signs didn't feel like explosions. They were more like tiny earthquakes, small shakes I tried to ignore, convincing myself the ground wasn't shifting. It started with little comments, the kind that sounded harmless, until they began piling up like stones on my chest. Alira would sigh whenever I walked into the room, as if my presence interrupted a world she wanted to live in without me. She'd roll her eyes when I asked simple questions like what she wanted for dinner or whether she needed help with something. It felt like I had become a background noise she didn't want to hear anymore. One evening, I walked into the living room and found her glued to her phone, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in months. When she noticed me, that smile vanished like it wasn't meant for me at all. "Can you not stand there like a statue?" she snapped. I remember blinking, not sure if I heard her right. She didn't even look up again. Another day, she brushed my hand away in public. The gesture was small, but the sting was sharp. I told myself she was stressed, tired, overwhelmed, an excuse that would soothe the growing ache in my chest. But her tone kept changing, getting colder, sharper, almost annoyed by my existence. Conversations turned into one-word replies. My presence felt like an inconvenience she had to tolerate. And yet, I stayed silent, trying to protect what was left. I thought love could survive disrespect. I didn't realize disrespect was only the beginning. The shift from quiet disrespect to open humiliation wasn't gradual. It was like she woke up one day and decided my dignity was optional. The first time it happened, we were at a small gathering with a few of her friends. I tried joining their conversation, offering a simple comment, nothing dramatic. Alira glanced at me, smirked, and said, "Please don't pretend you understand this. It's too complicated for you." Her friends laughed. I felt the room tilt for a moment, heat climbing up my neck. I forced a smile and swallowed the sting, telling myself she was joking. But her eyes told me she meant every word. After that, it became routine. If I asked something, she'd answer loudly, making sure everyone heard her irritation. If I offered an opinion, she'd dismiss it with a wave of her hand, as if I were a child interrupting grown-ups. The worst moment came one night at dinner when she called me emotionally dull right in front of her closest friend, laughing like it was the funniest thing she'd ever said. I felt something inside me, crack something I didn't know could break so cleanly. At home, I tried to talk to her, to understand what was happening. She didn't just shut me down, she scorched me. "Stop acting like you're some important part of my life," she snapped. "You're barely a factor." Her words didn't just hurt. They hollowed me out. I didn't know it then, but humiliation was just the doorway to something far darker. Suspicion doesn't arrive like thunder. It creeps in quietly, settling into the corners of your mind until you can't ignore it anymore. With Alira, It began with the late-night sex excuses that sounded rehearsed, like she'd practiced them in the mirror before saying them out loud. Work ran late. Team meeting. Just tired. The same script delivered with eyes that refused to meet mine. Her phone became a fortress. She used to leave it anywhere on the counter, on the couch, on the bed. Now it was always in her hand or hidden under a pillow. The moment I walked into a room, she'd lock it so fast it felt like a reflex. Once, I reached for it by mistake, thinking it was mine, and she snatched it away like I had touched fire. "Don't touch my things," she snapped, breathing hard. That was the first time I felt actual fear. Every small sign stacked on top of the next, her sudden interest in dressing up late at night. The secretive smiles she tried to smother. The way she'd whisper on calls and then fall silent the moment she sensed my presence. I couldn't deny it anymore. Something was happening behind my back. Something big enough to change her entire behavior. But the part that terrified me wasn't the possibility of betrayal. It was the calmness she carried, the coldness that replaced every trace of warmth she once had for me. She wasn't just distant, she was gone. The night everything unraveled was strangely quiet, the kind of silence that warns you something is about to break. Alira told me she had a work dinner, her voice steady, her expression unreadable. I watched her get ready to much perfume, a dress she hadn't worn for me in years, a kind of glow that didn't belong to our home anymore. When she left, the door closed with a softness that felt final. I tried distracting myself, but the air felt heavy. I walked past her tablet and saw a notification flash across the screen. Her devices were still synced to our home network. I wish I hadn't looked. But my eyes moved before my mind could stop them. A message preview glowed in the dark. "Can't wait to see you again tonight." Karen Hale, my heart didn't just sink, it crashed. The name felt foreign, sharp, like a blade sliding between my ribs. I tapped the message, hands trembling so violently I could barely breathe. The thread opened into a gallery of conversations, each one a punch to my chest. Compliments, flirtations, plans. Her words, her lies, her promises. All for someone who wasn't me. I stood there staring at the screen while the room spun slowly around me. It was like reading the script of a life I didn't know existed, a life she had built quietly while I slept beside her. My knees weakened, my throat tightened, and for the first time, I felt something break inside me clean, irreversible. The truth wasn't a suspicion anymore. It was undeniable. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, her messages replayed like a cruel echo, each line cutting deeper than the last. By morning, I wasn't angry, not yet. I was hollow, numb, drifting in a space where pain had turned strangely quiet. When Alira walked into the kitchen, humming softly, as if nothing had happened, something inside me twisted. I couldn't hold it in any longer. I asked her calmly if we could talk, my voice shaky but controlled. She didn't even sit down. She just crossed her arms and stared at me with that cold, distant expression. I told her I knew. Her affair, Kieran, the messages, everything. She blinked once, tilted her head, and laughed. Not a nervous laugh. Not a guilty one. A cruel, mocking laugh that felt like a slap across my soul. So what she said. "What are you going to do, Kaylin?" beg. "You're too weak to even leave." Her words hit harder than the truth itself. I felt heat crawl up my neck, my heartbeat pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. I tried to speak, to ask why, but she cut me off again. "Don't pretend you matter that much. You're nothing compared to him." That was the moment something in me finally snapped. Not in raging, but in realization. The man she loved, respected, or even cared about wasn't me anymore. Maybe it hadn't been for a long time. I didn't shout. I didn't break anything. I just walked away quietly, planning what came next. 2 days passed in a fog so thick I could barely think straight. Alira moved through the house like a stranger, unbothered, unashamed, almost energized after tearing me apart. I spent most of my time sitting alone in the living room, staring at nothing, replaying her laughter in my mind. I thought I had reached the lowest point possible until my phone rang. An unknown number flashed on the screen. Normally I would have ignored it, but something inside me told me to answer. The moment I said hello, a shaky male voice responded, "Sir, is this Kalen Rivaro?" The word sir stunned me. Nobody had spoken to me with respect in months, especially not someone connected to the mess my life had become. I asked who he was, and there was a long, nervous pause before he finally whispered, "My name is Kieran Hale." My chest tightened. His name alone felt heavy, like holding a live wire. I expected anger, arrogance, maybe even triumph. But instead, he sounded afraid. Truly afraid. "Sir, please listen," he said. "I didn't know she was married. She said terrible things about you, that you were controlling, violent, dangerous. I swear I wouldn't have gone near her if I knew the truth." My breath caught. Alira hadn't just betrayed me, she had rewritten me into a monster to justify her lies. Kieran's voice cracked as he continued, "I think she's manipulating both of us. I need to meet you. There's more you should know." For the first time in days, my numbness lifted, replaced by something far more unsettling. A shift. A crack in the story I thought I understood. I met Kieran at a quiet cafe tucked behind a row of old bookstores' neutral ground, far from the chaos Alira had created. I arrived early, my hands cold, despite the warm air. When he walked in, he didn't look like the villain I had imagined. He looked shaken, guilty, and exhausted, almost like a man trying to outrun his own choices. He spotted me immediately, hesitated, then approached with his head bowed. "Sir, I'm sorry," he murmured, before he even sat down. I didn't say anything at first. I just watched him, trying to understand the person Alira had chosen over me. But the longer I looked, the more I realized he wasn't some perfect replacement. He was just another victim caught in her web. He explained everything, voice trembling. She'd told him she was single, claimed her marriage ended long ago, painted me as some controlling, unstable man who refused to let go. She used his sympathy like a weapon, twisting his emotions to pull him closer. He showed me messages I hadn't seen, her lies, her manipulations, her plans to drain him financially under the guise of support. The more he revealed, the heavier the truth became. I wasn't just betrayed. I was rewritten, turned into a villain, so she could justify destroying what we had. When he said, "I think she's dangerous," something inside me finally aligned. Two strangers, both broken by the same person, sitting across from each other like survivors of a storm neither of us saw coming. Kieran leaned forward, voice low. "We need to do something together." Walking out of that cafe with Kieran, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. A sense of clarity. Not anger, not revenge. Clarity. The blindfold Alira had tied around both our eyes was finally off, and the truth stood there, raw and undeniable. Kieran and I weren't rivals. We were collateral damage. And the only way to reclaim our dignity was to expose the truth she had worked so hard to bury. We talked for hours, piecing together timelines, comparing messages, analyzing every lie she fed us. It was almost disturbing how icily she manipulated both our realities. But the more we talked, the more determined we became. Not to hurt her, but to force her mask to fall. The plan was simple, yet loaded with tension. Kieran would invite her to a place she felt safe with him, a private studio space he sometimes used for work. He'd tell her he missed her, needed to see her, wanted to talk about the future. It had to sound convincing, and knowing how deeply she craved control, we both knew she'd come without hesitation. Meanwhile, I would be there before she arrived. Not hiding in the shadows, not waiting to ambush her, but simply standing in the same room she had filled with lies. I didn't want violence. I wanted truth. I wanted her to see the two men she had torn apart standing together. As we finalized the plan, a strange calm settled over me. This wasn't revenge. This was finally reclaiming the version of myself she tried to erase. The room felt impossibly quiet when she walked in, a kind of silence that presses against your skin and makes every heartbeat thunder. Alira moved in with the same confident stride she always had, unaware of what awaited her. Her smile faltered the instant she saw me standing there, calm but unyielding. Kieran was beside me, nervously shifting, but steady. For the first time in months, I realized the fear she had instilled in both of us could now be reflected back at her. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't shout. I let the truth speak for itself. I showed her the messages, every lie, every manipulation, every secret she had tried to bury. Her face changed with each revelation, first disbelief, then panic, then the realization that she had been exposed. Kieran added the pieces she couldn't deny, his voice trembling but firm. The woman who had made me feel invisible now had no words left to hide behind. She tried to shift blame, tried to twist the story, but the threads of her lies were already unraveled. I could feel the tension, the humiliation, the control slipping from her grasp. She lunged at Kieran, striking him out of desperation. I stepped between them not as a protector, but as the man she once knew, now fully in control of himself. And then I walked away. Not with rage, not with vengeance, but with dignity. She screamed after me, but I didn't look back. For the first time, I felt free. I thought the hardest part was walking away, leaving Alira to face her own unraveling. But karma, I realized, doesn't wait. It has a way of finding its mark in the quietest, most precise way. Days after our confrontation, I heard from mutual friends what had begun to happen. The woman who had treated me like I was nothing, who had laughed at my pain, was now facing the consequences of every manipulation, every lie, every cruel word. Kieran had reported the financial schemes she had used to manipulate him, carefully documented, undeniable proof. Friends who once applauded her charm now recoiled in disgust, refusing to associate with someone who had so casually deceived the people around her. Her workplace, once impressed by her charisma and confidence, began to unravel her carefully constructed reputation when her dishonesty came to light. She was losing everything: respect, trust, status, and even her sense of control. I watched from a distance, not with glee, but with a quiet sense of justice. She had believed she could juggle the lives and emotions of everyone around her, that she could shape reality to her desires. But life has a way of balancing the scales. Her laughter, once cruel and directed at me, was replaced with the emptiness of isolation and regret. And for the first time in months, I truly understood the meaning of freedom. Alira had called me nothing. Life showed her what nothing feels like. Walking away from Alira didn't feel like victory at first. Felt strange, almost foreign, to exist in a world where my decisions weren't dictated by someone else's lies or manipulation. But with each passing day, the weight on my chest lifted, replaced by a clarity I hadn't known I could carry. I realized that freedom isn't loud. It isn't revenge. It isn't the humiliation of someone else. Freedom is quiet, steady, and deeply personal. It's waking up without fear, without doubt, without the constant question of whether the people you love truly see you. Kieran and I never became close friends. Our paths had collided and diverged like ships that share a storm. But we both carried the same lesson. Strength is not built on anger. It is built on surviving, understanding, and walking away when you must. Life has a way of teaching you who you are through the fires of betrayal. And sometimes, the harshest truths reveal the strongest selves. As for me, I've rebuilt my life slowly, carefully, with people who value honesty, trust, and respect. I've learned to recognize the subtle erosion of dignity before it takes root. I've learned to listen to that quiet, guiding voice that says, "Walk away. Don't let anyone make you invisible." And as I reflect, I can't help but smile. Alira thought she had power over me. She thought she could rewrite reality. But life, in its quiet, unstoppable way, had rewritten her. She called me nothing. I became everything that mattered: myself. Thank you for listening. If you found this story powerful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real-life stories of truth, betrayal, and karma.